Here's an interesting article entitled, "Is Evolution Pseudoscience?" The author goes to the Skeptics Dictionary and he looks at the 10 characteristic fallacies of pseudoscientific theories. And he finds, after going through all 10 of them, that of the 10 characteristics of pseudoscience listed in the Skeptics Dictionary, evolution meets 9. Few other pseudosciences, astrology, astral projection, alien abduction, crystal power, or whatever, would meet so many. The article is certainly worth reading at your leisure. I would like to focus on one thing in particular, though. I would like to focus in on the main reason why Darwinian evolution fails to be a proper science is in reality a pseudoscience. That number one reason is that Darwinian evolution does not have a rigid mathematical basis to be tested against, as other overarching theories of science have. David Berlinski puts it like this: quantum electrodynamics is accurate to 13 or so decimal places. So too general relativity. A leaf trembling in the wrong way would suffice to shatter either theory. What can Darwinian theory offer in comparison? Here are a couple of short video clips of David Berlinski.
Let's put it this way. Before you can ask, is Darwinian theory correct or not, you have to ask the preliminary question, is it clear enough so that it could be correct? That's a very different question. One of my prevailing doctrines about Darwinian theory is, man, that thing is just a mess. It's like looking into a room full of smoke. Nothing in the theory is precisely, clearly, carefully defined or delineated. It lacks all of the rigor one expects from mathematical physics, and mathematical physics lacks all of the rigor one expects from mathematics. So we're talking about a gradual descent down the level of intelligibility until we reach evolutionary biology. But lots and lots of people are skeptical in the scientific community. I know dozens of mathematicians who scratch their head and say, you guys think this is the way life originated? It's absolutely a preposterous theory. Who simply don't accept it, don't even regard it as a scientific theory in any reasonable sense.
And there are indeed some high-level mathematicians that don't even regard Darwinian evolution as a proper scientific theory. Peter Saunders comments that it's merely a paradigm, and the reason that it's not a theory is that Darwinian evolution, is not falsifiable. Peter Saunders has been applying mathematics to biology for over 40 years and has been a critic for almost as long. In the following video, at the 10-minute mark, Dr. Robert Marks speaks about Gregory Chaitin's admission that Darwinian evolution has no mathematical basis.
Gregory Chaitin is probably one of the greatest mathematicians of the latter part of the 20th century. He, along with Kolmogorov and Solomonoff, created Kolmogorov-Chaitin-Solomonoff information theory. Some people know this as Kolmogorov information theory. And he came up with a very interesting statement. He said, the honor of mathematics requires us to come up with a mathematical theory of evolution and either prove that Darwin was wrong or right. He wrote a book about this, and we actually showed very nicely in his book where he was putting information in order to make his evolution work. We actually shared the paper with him. He's a professor in Argentina right now, and he liked it. He said, man, thank you for the thoughtful understanding. I can see what you're saying. Would you send me a copy? We sent him a preprint so I can share it with my class later.
And here's the paper that you can read at your leisure if you want. that Robert Marx was talking about. And here's a quote by Roger Highfield, in which he admits that on a book on the most powerful equations in science, that the chapter from a renowned evolutionist did not include a single equation. In an article entitled "Evolution is Missing a Mathematical Formula," the author states, "But no scientist has been able to derive any working formula from the theory of evolution, and no one has been able to quantify its dictums." Mathematician Murray Eden, in an article entitled "Inadequacies of Neo-Darwinian Evolution as a Scientific Theory," stated that an adequate scientific theory of evolution must await the discovery and elucidation of new natural laws, physical, physico-chemical, and biological. Renowned evolutionist Ernst Mayr admitted that there are no natural laws in biology corresponding to the natural laws of the physical sciences. Renowned physicist Wolfgang Pauli states that Darwinists become very irrational when they use the word chance, no longer combined with estimations of mathematically defined probability, in its application to very rare events more or less synonymous with the old word miracle. And really it's not that surprising, that the randomness postulate of Darwinian evolution would prevent a rigid mathematical basis from being formed for Darwinian evolution. Einstein commented, "You may find it strange that I consider the comprehensibility of the world as a miracle. A priori, one should expect a chaotic world which cannot be grasped by the mind in any way." In an article entitled "The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences," renowned physicist Eugene Wigner stated, "Certainly it is hard to believe that our reasoning power was brought, by Darwin's process of natural selection, to the perfection which it seems to possess. It is difficult to avoid the impression that a miracle confronts us here." In this article, David Berlinski states that there is no argument against religion that is not also an argument against mathematics. Mathematicians are capable of grasping a world of objects that lies beyond space and time. Mathematical intuition is utterly mysterious. So, for that matter, is the fact that mathematical objects such as the Lie group or a differential manifold have the power to interact with elementary particles or accelerating forces. But these are precisely the claims that theologians have made as well, that human beings are capable, by an exercise of their devotional abilities, to come to some understanding of the deity, and the deity, although beyond space and time, is capable of interacting with material objects. Of related interest to Darwinian evolution having no rigid mathematical basis, as other theories of science have, it is interesting to note that, nonetheless, the numbers one gets from mathematics against Darwinian evolution being true should, by all rights, be more than enough to falsify it as a scientific theory. Here's a paper by Cornelius Hunter, who has a PhD in biophysics, that goes over some of the insurmountable probabilities facing Darwinian evolution producing just a single functional protein. Several more numbers can be found in this article. Mathematician Grenville Sewell as early ID theorist, and you can find many more astronomical numbers against Darwinian evolution being true in comment 2, and you can also find some very interesting quotes in comment 1. But some people may say, what about population genetics? And indeed, from the debates I've had with neo-Darwinists, you would think that population genetics has got evolution all proven out, all figured out. But that is not the case at all. In fact, population genetics falsifies neo-Darwinian claims. In the following article, population geneticist Richard Lewontin states, we've tried to test these ideas in the field and the lab, and there are really no measurements that match up the quantities I've told you about. In the following paper, entitled Using Numerical Simulation to Test the Validity of Neo-Darwinian Theory, John Sanford, who is the inventor of the ballistic gene gun, states that when any reasonable set of biological parameters are used, Mendel's provides overwhelming empirical evidence that all of the fatal flaws in evolutionary genetic theory are real. This leaves evolutionary genetic theory effectively falsified with a degree of certainty that should satisfy any reasonable and open-minded person. You can access the link there and read more at your own leisure if you so desire. In fact, population genetics forced Darwinists to abandon natural selection as a major player in evolution. John Sanford comments about Camus' work. His theory led him to believe that most mutations are unselectable, and therefore most evolution must be independent of selection. In the following article, Engager, who is a biologist, states, people have been saying for years, of course evolution isn't random, it's directed by natural selection. It's not chance, it's chance and necessity. But in recent years the rhetoric has changed. Now evolution is constrained, not all options are open, and natural selection is not a major player. It's the happenstance of genetic drift that drives change. But somehow, it all happens anyway, and evolution gets the credit. Thus, in summary, evolution, besides having no rigid mathematical basis, Darwinists are fairly notorious for ignoring the math that does falsify what they claim. To end this video, I would like to highlight this short video on Karl Popper.
You might think that scientists begin with hypotheses such as all swans are white and then go about looking for evidence to support them. Karl Popper disagreed. He suggested that scientists do indeed begin with hypotheses, bold hypotheses that can be falsified by evidence. But rather than looking for supporting evidence, Popper argued scientists go out of their way to refute their own hypotheses, testing them to destruction. They go out searching for black swans, not more white swans. Science is all about falsification, not confirmation. It's a series of conjectures and refutations. A former Marxist himself, Popper wasn't fond of Marxism. Marxists argued that theirs was a scientific analysis of history. Everything that happened was determined by class struggle, and a workers' revolution was inevitable. However, when the workers failed to revolt, rather than taking this as a refutation of their view, Marxists suggested workers were simply victims of false consciousness, unable to see the situation as it truly was. Popper fulminated against this way of dealing with counter-evidence, claiming it immunized Marxist hypotheses, which were originally testable, turning them into irrefutable pseudo-science. There was no imaginable observation that could prove the Marxists were wrong. If the workers revolted, that showed the Marxists were right. If they didn't revolt, that also showed they were right. It was win-win.
And since Darwinian evolution does not have a rigid falsification criteria, since it does not have a rigid mathematical basis to test against, then Darwinian evolution, much like Marxist theory of socialism, is an unfalsifiable pseudoscience. Dr. Hunter puts the situation with evidence like this. Being an evolutionist means there is no bad news. If new species appear abruptly in the fossil record, that just means evolution operates in spurts. If species then persist for eons with little modification, that just means evolution takes long breaks. If clever mechanisms are discovered in biology, that just means evolution is smarter than we imagine. If strikingly similar designs are found in distant species, that just means evolution repeats itself. If significant differences are found in allied species, that just means evolution sometimes introduces new designs rapidly. If no likely mechanism can be found for the large-scale change evolution requires, that just means evolution is mysterious. If adaptation responds to environmental signals, that just means evolution has more foresight than was thought. If major predictions of evolution are found to be false, that just means evolution is more complex than we thought. And unlike Darwinian evolution, which has no rigid mathematical basis, intelligent design does have a rigid mathematical basis. It's based on the no free lunch theorems. In this article entitled Evolutionary Computing, the Invisible Hand of Intelligence, it states, William Dembski and Robert Marx have shown that no evolutionary algorithm is superior to blind search, unless information is added from an intelligent cause. What Marx and Dembski mathematically prove is as scientifically valid and relevant as Gödel's incompleteness theorem in mathematics. You can't prove a system of mathematics from within the system, and you can't derive an information-rich pattern from within the pattern. Ironically, the thing that would falsify intelligent design is the same exact thing that would lend at least some scientific respectability to Darwinian evolution, and that would be the observation of the generation of functional information by unguided material processes. David Abel puts it like this: if decision node programming selections are made randomly or by law rather than with purposeful intent, no non-trivial, sophisticated function will spontaneously arise. If only one exception to this null hypothesis were published, the hypothesis would be falsified. In fact, there's a $3 million prize for anyone who can falsify the basic falsification criteria of intelligent design. Perry Marshall puts it like this: show an example of information that doesn't come from a mind. All you need is one. A private equity investment group is offering a technology prize of $3 million for this discovery. We will financially reward and publicize the first person who can solve this. In the following video, Dr. Michael Behe elucidates how much easier it is to falsify intelligent design than it is to falsify Darwinian evolution.
The National Academy of Sciences has objected that intelligent design is not falsifiable, and I think that's just the opposite of the truth. Intelligent design is very open to falsification. I claim, for example, that the bacterial flagellum could not be produced by natural selection. It needed to be deliberately, intelligently designed. Well, all a scientist has to do to prove me wrong is to take a bacterium without a flagellum, or knock out the genes for the flagellum in a bacterium, go into his lab and grow that bug for a long time and see if it produces anything resembling a flagellum. If that happened, intelligent design, as I understand it, would be knocked out of the water. Now, I certainly don't expect it to happen, but it's easily falsified by a series of such experiments. Now let's turn that around and ask, how do we falsify the contention that natural selection produced the bacterial flagellum? If that same scientist went into the lab and knocked out the bacterial flagellum genes and grew the bacterium for a long time and nothing much happened, well, he'd say, well, maybe we didn't start with the right bacterium. Maybe we didn't wait long enough. Maybe we need a bigger population. And it would be very much more difficult to falsify the Darwinian hypothesis. So I think the very opposite is true. I think intelligent design is easily testable, easily falsifiable, although it has not been falsified. And Darwinism is very resistant to being falsified. They can always claim something was not right.
Thus, as you hopefully can see by now, despite the claim of Darwinists that intelligent design is a pseudoscience, the fact of the matter is that the shoe is very much on the other foot, and intelligent design does qualify as a rigorous science since it does have a falsification criteria, and Darwinian evolution does not, but is in fact a pseudoscience since there's no rigorous way to falsify any of its claims. And that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching.